Our guest, Jeffrey Castleman, will help us explore that question. Jeff is an SIOR Lead AP Partner and Senior Vice President, Workplace Strategies with CRG Clayco. He joined CRG Clayco in 2019 as Partner and Senior Vice President, Workplace Strategy. Jeff oversees CRG's national accounts and leads all client-related initiatives for the company's expanding industrial office and data center project delivery platform. Additionally, Jeff provides CRG clients with future-proofing strategies for the real estate holdings and workplaces. Jeff is also founder and CEO of Optimize Energy, a strategic energy procurement firm. Previously, he served as Executive Managing Director at Newmark, where he led Newmark's national industrial practice from 2014 to 2018. He also served as the 2017 Global President of SIOR. Mr. Castleman was recently honored by Crain's Chicago Business as a member of their most influential commercial real estate brokers in Chicago list, was inducted into the Midwest Commercial Real Estate Hall of Fame, has been a four-time CoStar Power Broker, and received Newmark's Outstanding Service Award. Mr. Castleman is an innovation-minded business futurist and accomplished global speaker on a variety of topics, including economic trends, innovation, sustainability, e-commerce, supply chain, blockchain, and exponential technologies. He has traveled the globe studying smart buildings and cities, provides mentoring to several prop technology startups, and sits on various advisory boards. He is also the Chicago Regional Chair for the Foundation for International Blockchain and Real Estate Enterprise, and a governing board member for Sky Foundation, a nonprofit pancreatic cancer research organization. With all that said, please welcome Mr. Jeffrey Kesselman.
Well done. Thank you, my friend.
This is all yours.
Okay, great. Awesome. I think can you all hear me okay? Great to be here with you. I think the most awkward thing of the day for me was that. I can't stand when they stand there and they read off all this stuff, and it's just like, all right, let's get on with it. So let's just get on with it, shall we? I'm a little rusty. That may be a surprise to everybody, right? I haven't done this in a while. So hopefully I remember how. It was fun to shave, put on a blazer, and get out from behind the screen. This is how tall I really am. Yes, I am standing up. That's it's okay. That's what goes with the in-person stuff. So anyways, it's really great to be here with you. Thank you so much for making this my first time out since about, what did you say, January, February of 2019. And thank you all for being here in person, and thank you to the people who are online to make time for this today. I hope that it's all new material. I had 18 months to work on it, so hopefully you'll really like it. I'm a little nervous to present it to you, but we'll see how it goes. I also just want to thank Tracy and Amanda, who did an amazing job. How about a round of applause for them for putting this together? I found you. They're hiding back there, just so you know. And the reaction panel is going to be amazing. I'm more excited, I think, about that. So with that, I'm just going to jump in. There's a lot of material. I'm going to go pretty quick. Bear with me, and we'll try to get to one or two questions at the end before the panel. Here's what we're going to talk about 1 year later. Here are my 10 takeaways. You'll have your own, even though we went through this together, but see what you think. And then 10 years beyond, sort of a bifurcated presentation, near term and far term. We'll set the stage, we'll talk about how and why, what's the math. We'll talk about what some of the X factors are, and then I'm going to do something that I've never actually done before. I'm going to give you 10 predictions for 10 years from now that will impact everybody in this room. Well, let me ask you a question. How many people expect to be here in 10 years? Pretty much every hand. Not every hand, by the way. I'm not sure why, but for the people that raised their hand, then it's for you. We'll go through those predictions, and you'll see what I think. I figure in 10 years I'll be retired, or who knows? You won't remember, so it's okay. I'll put myself out there a little bit. I do use some quotes for context when I talk. I found this one last night, and I really, really like it because I think it sums up what my experience has been with COVID, and maybe your experience as well. Life really isn't about waiting it out. It's about learning how to deal with it, right? We were all thrown a major curveball, and we all kind of figured it out along the way. It seemed daunting, and at first it was, not without follow-up curveballs and follow-up curveballs, but we got through it, or we're about to get through it. It sure seems like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Everybody agree with that? Pretty much. It's wishful thinking. So here's the first takeaway. This is a chart that shows COVID cases in Wisconsin as of May 8th. So it's very current information, okay? About as current as you can get and put into a presentation. Notice that on the right side, the number of cases is still greater than it was a year ago, even though it is declining and the trend is good. The point is that we're not quite out of the woods entirely yet, even though it's wonderful to be up here and to not wear a mask and to see all of your pretty faces and smiling faces and to see you not wearing masks. Absolutely amazing. That's going to be a disaster. Sorry, I'll put that in my pocket. But we're not the point is we're not out of the woods yet. In fact, I don't know how well you can see the charts, but on the left, there's a chart trying to show what it would take to get to herd immunity, although most experts will tell you now we can't get to herd immunity at all for a number of variants and other reasons. But we've got a ways to go in that regard. On the right, you can see the number of vaccinations has peaked and is actually declining. Just another roadblock in getting on with our lives. This is India, and you've seen on the news what's happening there. And if you have friends or family or if you know somebody, what's happening there is awful. And it's not limited to India, but India's the most populated place on the planet, and it's getting a lot of news coverage. But you will see spikes like this in other places around the world before this is all said and done. On the left is cases, on the right is deaths. 500,000 cases, new cases a day, 3,000 deaths a day, right? 30 days in a month, 31. It's unthinkable math. So we're not quite out of the woods yet. That's the takeaway. Okay, number two, how many people have ever witnessed a bona fide miracle? Raise your hand. Because I can't believe there's no hands going up. I think the speed by which they were able to create vaccines and then logistically deliver them and administer them is a bona fide miracle, and we just lived it. Doesn't mean that you should get a vaccination, or if that's not your thing, don't get it. I'm not here to preach about that. What I am saying is what used to take 5 years was done in less than a year, and it was technology aided. And I will talk about that in a little while, about how they were able to do AI and algorithmic modeling to figure out where the probabilities of success were going to be, and then to go right into trials with those. And that's what used to take so much longer. It's a bona fide miracle, but not just the fact that they created it so fast, the fact that with speed and scale and logistics, they're able to deliver it in the way that they have. You can see the coinciding decline in cases with the date they started vaccinating. And it's not a coincidence, it's simple math, okay? You just witnessed, you just lived through, you are living through a bona fide miracle, in my opinion. That's takeaway number two. Number three, the world has pivoted to technology in any number of interesting ways. Certainly, the application of AI, artificial intelligence, and algorithms to the vaccination compounds that they were able to bring together to develop and accelerate the delivery time. That was a technology play, like it or not. Digital twins, e-commerce, okay? My in-laws in Florida, lovely people, I adore them, I mean it sincerely, they are fabulous people. They had never bought a thing online before COVID. Going out to Publix gave them a reason to get out of the house, right? It's true. They had no choice for food delivery and for other things that they needed, medicines in particular. And so they tried it, and then they called us up and they said, what is this e-commerce thing? I just clicked a button and they showed up at 6 o'clock. Like, that's what it is? Like, that's what it is. And now they're addicts, okay? Which is grateful because I'm actually in the warehouse development business, and I really appreciate that. And for all of you who do e-commerce, I appreciate every one of you as well, and your family members, and everyone you know. More automation. There isn't enough labor. Labor's not coming back. Did we maybe, I don't really want to get it. When I was president of SIOR, I used to get talking points because I was flying around the world and giving a lot of speeches, and it always started with stay away from politics, right? Wherever I went, people wanted to ask me about the current administration and don't want to touch it. I'm not trying to steer into politics. But I don't know if we got it right in terms of the stimulus and the payments, because it seems to me, we're incenting some people to stay home when they could be working. And that's not working at this moment. We'll get through it, but it is part of the problem. But what it's done is it's ushered in an even more urgent era of automation where automation is applicable. Because of that, there's also no touch. There's also no calling in sick. There's no emotion when you get automation involved. Smart buildings. How many people have done virtual meetings? Everybody, right? How many people have done virtual tour in the real estate business, right? That's a thing, right? And it's working okay. It's working okay. Social media, cloud CAGR is now growing at an annual CAGR, compound annual growth rate of 50% per year, cloud, okay? So if anybody's in the data center business, good for you. If you're in the real estate construction, brokerage business, and you can get involved in data centers, not an easy market to penetrate, but if you can, it's about as robust right now as e-commerce is, right? And the facility business with e-commerce. Number 4, work from home is a thing, but so is back to work, right? So it seems like we're destined for those to coexist at least for a while. This is Salesforce approach. Their focus for the next 6 months, and this was just put out about a week ago. Technology, design, mental health. Not a lot of people talk about mental health, right? It's just not something we talk about for whatever that reason is. But it's a big thing coming out of COVID, right? Really big thing. That's number 3 on Salesforce list. Employee training, right? Remote work. Those are their priorities for the next 6 months, which is really interesting. Sometimes we look to the tech companies who are big employers and in theory are on cutting edge and they're doing well. And so they're really a bellwether for what happens in the office world, office space world. And so we look to them sometimes. And so the tech company test here says, well, gee, how many people are going fully remote? Not very many. How many people are returning to the office full steam ahead? Not very many. So it sure seems like that hybrid approach seems to be where we're headed. By the way, my company, which has 4 floors in a downtown high-rise in Chicago, is officially back to work full speed ahead as of Monday of this week. They are leaders in that space in encouraging downtown Chicago to reopen. They're very vocal about it, writing, op-ed pieces for Cranes, and they want to see the city center in Chicago come back to life, and that means bringing people back to work. This is Castle. How many people have used Castle key cards? Probably a lot of people, right? You know what they do? They're tracking swipes. They know if you're in the office or not. So they started putting out this barometer, which is really interesting, because really what they're doing is reporting on 10 major cities around the country how many people are actually swiping in, and that's how they know that they're back to the office. So very interesting. You can follow that for free if you just go to the Castle site or Google it or tweet it or what have you. I think it's a coexistence, at least for a while. The dynamics are, it's where the magic happens. Let's face it, we're social creatures. That's why social media is a thing, right? We're very social. That happens mostly in person. You get some of that online, but not in the same way, right? Health and safety now sort of front and center for amenities. Certainly we cover more use of tech, new configurations. Suddenly we want private offices. We don't want that big open space anymore. Kind of interesting how that swung. I don't know if that sticks or not. I think the CBD, the Central Business District, it definitely springs back. It's where all the critical mass is, in my opinion. But the suburbs, which at least in Chicagoland had been left for dead in terms of office space, is very much alive, doing very well. People are willing to leave their house, but they don't necessarily want to be in a high rise in a downtown environment. They don't want to ride the elevator. They want to park, walk into the space, walk out, go home, right? There's return to office anxiety. I actually saw something this morning that talked about return anxiety. Somebody's coined that as a thing, and I agree. I think it's a thing. But I think suburbs can be viable, especially where there's maybe like Brookfield. I guess I don't know maybe as well as you do, but there's a lot of critical mass right here. It doesn't feel like the suburbs. It feels like anything you want is within reach here. Sort of a metro burb in a sense. Certainly shifting dynamics. I'll talk about DICE a little later and not spend time on it now. But here's the big thing for me, and I've been in the space business for over 30 years. There's too much office space. There's just too much of it. And it's not going to be absorbed as quickly as industrial or data center or some other ones. And so there is a reckoning, right? If 30 or 40, 50% of the office space is reoccupied, what happens to the other 30, 40, 50%? Is it schools? Is it medical? Does it require a code rewrite by a city? Is it, what's the use for that? Is it hospitality? Is it residential? More mixed uses where it used to be 100% office. I think that's an inevitability because of COVID. Number 5, probably my favorite one, and I apologize for the blatant commercial. That is our brand at CRG. We build buildings and we call them the cubes for cubic capacity, right? So e-commerce is a thing. I think we already agreed on that, right? But I can prove it in math. If you look on the left-hand graph, there's a bar that goes skyward on the right-hand side. Guess what? That corresponds with COVID, right? That's my in-laws buying stuff when they didn't used to buy stuff, and that's me buying more than I used to buy. That's all of us, okay? But not just in the United States. Globally, look at the numbers and how they spiked and the percentages by which they spiked in the last year. E-commerce was hot before COVID. It's super white hot. And so CBRE, anybody here from CBRE? Anybody? So CBRE put out a really good report that said for every $1 trillion in e-commerce sales, that you need 1.2 million square feet of modern warehouse space, okay? I'm about to show you that we have $5 trillion of e-commerce by the end of 2021, okay? Which means I'm 14 years or 15 years short of equilibrium supply in the supply-demand equation of warehouse space to e-commerce demand. So e-commerce isn't going anywhere. It's not over next year, and it's not over the year after that. Here's the $5 trillion global market, growing exponentially. It will. Most experts will tell you it's going to dip a little bit after COVID, because as we leave the house, maybe we'll have more bricks and mortar in-person retail experiences, which means a little bit less purchasing online, okay? So maybe we've had a peak, remains to be seen, but that's why you see the red line the way it is. But as you can see, these numbers are very, very compelling, and how you get to $5 trillion in a conservative estimate. And by the way, we think we're such a big deal in the United States. Look what China's doing with e-commerce, right? We're the sideshow, as it turns out. So I stuck one in here. This is 5A. If e-commerce is a thing, then reverse logistics is also a thing. How many people buy stuff online and return some of it? Be honest. Just raise your hand. It's okay. It's being recorded, but nobody's taking notes. Okay? So here's the math. If there's $4 trillion or $5 trillion in global e-commerce sales, we now know also, by the way, from that same CBRE report, that the average consumer buys 5 SKUs, 5 items, and they return 2 of them. 40% goes back, okay? 40%. So if there's $5 trillion going out, then logically you have $2 trillion of inventory coming back. And the last thing you want is that clogging up a high volume fulfillment center. And so reverse logistics is a thing because A, it's complicated. That's why you see the decision tree there. Is it clean? Is it opened? Is it unopened? Do I have to disinfect it? Can I sell it for parts? Can I refurbish it? Do I have to restock it? Can I sell it out of the warehouse? Right? I mean, I could go on with that list, as it turns out. It's a complicated thing. And so now they're opening their own facilities. Amazon's opening 200 inbound return centers only. That's all they will do at these buildings around the country. Okay? So 5A, reverse logistics is a thing. The K recovery, it's a real thing too. This has not affected everybody equally. Let's just be really honest about it. It's been really hard on women who are caregivers and, right, they're taking care of their parents and their kids and the households. It's not fair necessarily, but I think that's a real thing. Parents with children, a lot of my colleagues with young kids, and that's not my wife on anymore. Our kids are grown, so it hasn't been my personal thing, but my partner in my energy company has a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I've seen what it's done over the last 18 months or so to their family and how hard it's been for them. It's harder for them than it is for my wife and I, period, end of story, because of COVID. It's not equal, right? Certainly minorities almost everywhere. every demographic, every location have not had the same experience as many of us have had. Baby boomers. How many baby boomers do you know that were furloughed and not brought back because they brought somebody back younger, cheaper, quote, better, even though they would never say that, right? It hasn't been fair to baby boomers. How about service workers, right? Not the same as a construction. If you're unemployed, do you take the government stipend, or do you go back to work? It's a really tough decision, and I don't envy those who have to make it. In the context of real estate, if you're an industrial broker, you probably had a really great year. If you're an office broker, maybe not such a good year. It's a K recovery in so many different ways. Number 7, inflation. We were having some chatter before the session started about the supply chain and the spot shortages of chips and of steel and lumber prices going up. I thought the cartoon, was that John? Who said that? John, right? Yeah, it's funny because I could visualize it as you were saying it, right? It looks like inflation is coming. How bad? It depends on who you listen to and who you believe. Do you listen to Fox or do you listen to CNN? But the point is, you can see what COVID has done to pricing. And if inflation goes up and interest rates go with it, just as the economy should be heating back up again, it may not be quite as hot. It's really a complicated, it's a hot mess is really what it is. I can't tell you how much inflation is coming, but it's coming. I'm not that worried about it, but I think it's worth watching. So what is DICE, by the way? I talked about that earlier. This is something I coined a while ago. Nick, this is for you. This was a retail thing, okay? When the world wanted to talk about retail reinvention, I reflected on my own experience with it and came up with something called DICE. For me to be engaged with a retailer, it has to be different. It has to have differentiation. If it's a commoditized experience, it's not a good experience. It has to inspire me to want to go there or want to engage with it, right? There has to be something inspirational about it, or why would I even go there? It has to have a community that I'm comfortable in, and maybe that I want to share with my family or my friends or my colleagues, right? So there has to be a communal access to it, and there has to be a bona fide experience. It's got to be experiential. It's got to have all elements of all 4 of those for me to want to engage over and over and over, which is what you want if you're a retailer or a business, right? You want a returning customer. You want them to have those things so they come back for more. But each time they come back, they want a different experience. So what are some examples of that? Well, on the left, you can see my family and I. This is pre-COVID. Notice there's no masks. This was Christmas of 2019. We went to Las Vegas. We checked into the Waldorf Astoria, and that's Pepper the robot. And Pepper checked us in. Very experiential. Way cool. Never dealt with a person. Way, way, way cool. That's the Apple store on the Chicago River off of Michigan Avenue with the biggest touch screen you've ever seen and with stadium seating. Okay? It's experiential. And every time you go, what's on the screen or who's running the content is different. It's very experiential. I'm going to show you a video real quick of what I think is one of the best experiential experiences out there today. How many people have been to an Amazon Go? Table over here. Anybody else? Oh, you're going to like this. Usually more people have seen it. Yeah, I see a lot of people going, right? Do you think it's experiential? Right? How cool is it? You walk in, you walk out. You don't pay. You pay sort of, but take a look.
4 years ago, we started to wonder, what would shopping look like if you could walk into a store, grab what you want, and just go? What if we could weave the most advanced machine learning, computer vision, and AI into the very fabric of a store so you never have to wait in line? No lines, no checkouts, no registers. Welcome to Amazon Go. Use the Amazon Go app to enter. Then put away your phone and start shopping. It's really that simple. Take whatever you like. Anything you pick up is automatically added to your virtual cart. If you change your mind about that cupcake, just put it back. Our technology will update your virtual cart automatically. So, how does it work? We used computer vision, deep learning algorithms, and sensor fusion, much like you'd find in self-driving cars. We call it Just Walk Out technology. Once you've got everything you want, you can just go. When you leave, our Just Walk Out technology adds up your virtual cart and charges your Amazon account. Your receipt is sent straight to the app, and you can keep going. Amazon Go. No lines, no checkout. No, seriously.
So a couple things about that. Nick, you probably know in the retail world, they talk about shrinkage, right? Which is, right? Their shrinkage is equal to the industry, but improving where the rest of the industry is static because they're getting better at it, okay? Number two, they are now taking their technology and adding it to their new large format grocery stores, which they're rolling out around the country. And thirdly, they are selling this technology to other retailers. So if you haven't had this experience yet at Amazon Go, you probably will have it in the next year or two or three if you choose to, and it is crazy. I literally went to an Amazon Go, which is right now sort of more like a 7-Eleven. It's a small format. And you buy your 3 or 4 things, and you just walk out, and I'm like looking around like, is it okay? Is it okay if I just walk out? Like, I know I'm supposed to, but is anybody watching me? Like, is it okay? I walked out, and I got an email about, I don't know, halfway back to my house, back to my condo in Chicago, and 100% accurate. And it's like, oh, that's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. That's DICE, okay? Now, in the couple years I've been talking about DICE, I've seen DICE apply beyond retail. I think it applies to office spaces. I think it applies to warehouse spaces. I think it applies to reverse logistics. When you start to really think about your experience and what engages you personally and what you gravitate back to, think about DICE and think about whether it has applicability to you or to your family or to your business. Number 9, we weren't ready, were we? Were we ready for COVID? Was anybody really ready? One of my big takeaways is I think the healthcare system almost collapsed before our very eyes, in the same way that in 2008, the financial system almost collapsed before our very eyes because they weren't ready for what happened then, okay? I don't think our schools or our education system was ready. I don't think, if you look what happened in the Capitol or in other elements of government, budgeting, school systems, I don't think they were ready. I don't think our infrastructure, how many people saw what happened with the pipeline, with the ransomware cyber attack in the last couple days, okay? I promise you our infrastructure is not ready. That wasn't the big one. That was just a little test to see how we react, okay? They're probing to see what will work, how hard, how easy, how much, how long, where else. If that had been the electric grid, could you imagine? Okay? But that day's coming, and not because I'm this gloom and doom person. I'm seeing it all over the place. We're not ready. Supply chain, we already covered that, not ready. Were we ready for the civil unrest and the social engagement? The pure emotion that came? We weren't ready. How about my wife? I'm embarrassed to say this. My wife is one of those toilet paper hoarders. I'm glad she's not here today. It would not be a good ride back to Chicago. But the truth is, she is. And she just went to Costco. She's like, guess what? Guess what? They had toilet paper, so I bought some. I'm like, where are we going to store it? We've got a room full of toilet paper. Like, we weren't ready for this, right? That is clearly a takeaway. And last but not least, I'll let you watch this. This wasn't the big one. This was the little one. Order of magnitude, right? It's not the last time we have an event like this. I hope it's 100 years from now. I hope we're more ready whenever it does happen. But this says, this wasn't that big, even though it seems enormous to me and hopefully to many of you. I've had a few family members pass away from COVID. I've had a front row seat to it. I'm sure many of you have had the same thing. I'm not alone. Seems big to me, and yet this tells me it wasn't the big one and there's more coming one day somehow. So those are my 10 takeaways. I don't want to dwell on the negative, but I felt that it was really compelling enough to want to share with you today. Let's get on to the tech stuff, because that's the stuff I really enjoy talking about, if that's okay with you. Let's go to 10 years beyond. Everybody agree with the takeaways? Anybody have a different takeaway? Did I cover it? It's new material. I need feedback. Was it okay? Maybe. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Let's set the stage. World Economic Forum, one of the most respected think tanks in the world. Very non-political organization. Right before COVID, came out with this statement. We are on the brink of a tech revolution that will change everything about us. And I mean everything. And in its scale, scope, and complexity, it will be unlike anything we've ever experienced before. So, how do we make policy? How do we budget for this when we don't even have a context for it, really? I'm going to show you in a minute that we're using these tools for something that looks like this, and it's a mismatch. And we're going to go through that. But first, I wanted to set the stage. I also wanted to give some credit to these four gentlemen. I've been very fortunate to spend time with each of them. They are all, relatively well-known, famous, well-regarded for different reasons. And I met them all separately, and yet they all talk about the same stuff, which is, that's sort of when I really jumped in. When four different people over four different conversations in four different unrelated places all said, yeah, these are the things that are going to be happening. And here's why. And it's sooner than you think, and it's more robust than you think, and you need to get on the train. It's like, whoa, okay. So if you don't know them, Google them. You've probably seen them on TV. The one you may not know is James Whitaker, but you should know James. He was the lead engineer at Microsoft that gave us the browser. Okay? And then Google hired him away from Microsoft, and guess what he created there? He created Chrome. Okay? And I got to spend a weekend with him in Jackson Hole at a real estate tech retreat right before COVID started, and he's a very opinionated, very animated individual. He's got a great quote coming up that I want to share with you. Here's what Peter says about it. And by the way, if you don't know Peter, he ushered in privatized space travel through the X Prize and some other things. He's also partners with Elon Musk and SpaceX. He's a big speaker, big talker. I'll stop doing that, I promise. The only constant is change, and the rate of change is increasing. Pretty straightforward. Dr. Kaku, who's always on TV, you've probably seen him on late night talk shows or on MSNBC or CNBC. Over the next 100 years or less, we're going to be like the gods we once worshipped. Our tools won't be magic wands or potions, but the science and the math of computers and nanotech and AI, but mostly of the quantum theory. And so we'll talk about that as well. Here's what James had to say to me. So we were arguing about, in a playful way, I'd like to believe, robotics, automation, sensors, data. We're covering all the full range of technologies. He's like, stop. Just shut up, dude. Mark my words. When it comes to disruptive technology, there's AI. And that's where the conversation ends. AI layers on top of everything else. So you can talk about everything else, but it's really going to be about the AI. And we will get into that. Here's what Ray says. Ray is often regarded as the living Thomas Edison. He invented speech-to-text, text-to-speech, electric synthesizer when he was 16 years old, a number of things. If you're not familiar with him, please Google him. You'll be shocked. He is the ultimate predictor of the future. He's been right 87% of the time, and he's predicted some wild and crazy things. He's almost never wrong. When he is, he's only off by a year or 6 months. He's really not off, okay? So check out Ray. We won't experience 100 years progress in the next 100 years. Huh? It'll be more like 20,000 years. And that's at today's rate, which Peter just told you is accelerating exponentially. How is this possible? Well, we've got something called Moore's Law that's been around since 1965. So in the past 55 or 60 years or so, computing power has doubled every 18 to 24 months, or conversely, purchasing power has doubled in that same amount of time. So we're now on the verge of 30 iterations, okay? It's only going to take 1 or 2 more iterations to turn the world and everything you know about the world upside down. So this is where linear and exponential start to separate. What is 30 steps, right? If I walk like this, I go 30 feet. If I take 30 exponential steps, I go 1 billion meters. just about, okay? Easy math. If I fold a simple sheet of paper 50 times, over and over and over, I have enough to go from the Earth to the sun, okay? How many people have the latest iPhone? If you do, you have an A14 Bionic chip in there, which has, this is not a misprint, almost 12 billion transistors in it. So 12 billion of anything is really a lot, don't you think? And to cram it all into here, and other stuff too, like videos, video terminals, right? To cram all that into here is remarkable to me. But it's capable of 11 trillion operations per second. It can do 11 trillion things per second, okay? And it's still growing exponentially. That is linear versus exponential. Here's what it looks like on the curve. What you should take away from this slide is the deceptive part of the curve. When something behaves linearly and then suddenly shoots skyward. Because a lot of policy and a lot of decisions and a lot of budgets are taking place in that deceptive part of the curve. And so you think you're dealing with something linear, but you didn't stop to check the math. And it turns out you were dealing with something exponential, okay? And that's where we tend to get into trouble. If you look at the one on the right, what I've circled, that's where we are in the next 1 or 2 turns of Moore's Law. That's what happens, okay? No wonder that the Internet of Things looks like that same curve. It's no wonder that it took the airplane and the car and the telephone more than 50 years each to achieve 50 million users. It took Pokemon Go a grand total of 19 days. Okay? Exponential technology. Here's a visualization of it, and I liked it because it shows Chicago and Milwaukee so well. So if you follow that same computation of doubling and doubling and again, that's how long it would take to fill Lake Michigan. Nothing, 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 deceptive, right? Linear. Oh, no, exponential. Okay? So good visualization to share with you. Everything will be obsolete in 10 years. It's not my fault. I'm sorry. I am the messenger. I got it from those 4 guys. Blame them. It's not me. But it is a thing. Okay? So what is the real pace of change anyways? Well, you've got tech change. And we've just sort of graphed that and mapped that and told you why and given you the math behind it. But just because that's the tech change doesn't mean it's the social change or the business change, right? It doesn't mean that everybody's on the same page that way. In fact, if you look on the curve on the right, you will see an adaptation for COVID that says, hey, all that's going to change a little bit faster than it was, but it's really the same curve, right? Political change is not at the same speed as social change. We live that every day. You feel it, right? You got to kind of agree with that. Here's all the markets that will be trillion-dollar markets by 2025. So this is just sort of setting the stage for 2031, which is where I'm going to finish my remarks today. I don't know if you can see all those, but here's another slide that shows similar things, right? These are all the different disruptive technologies that become mainstream, and you almost won't be able to remember a day when you didn't have these to use or they weren't there for you, right? How many people really remember doing business without email? How many people remember, do you? I have a hard time remembering, and I started in 1987, and trust me, there was no email then. I went on my honeymoon, I came back, we moved offices, they set me up, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? Is it email? Like, what do you do with that? I have no idea, right? I remember it like it was yesterday. Cell phones. Can you remember doing business without cell phones? Well, that's what's about to happen to you in the mid-20s. Here, 2025. Okay? That's just, the math is staggering. I'm not going to go through every one of them. But this is halfway to 2031, which is really want to focus. So this guy's been in the news lately. Anybody seen him in the news? Yeah, right? But he said something, and he said this 17 or 18 years ago, by the way. And this is sort of a junior Moore's Law in my book. We always overestimate what will occur in the next 2 years, but we're way off. We way underestimate what happens in the next 10. And that's really what we're talking about here. It's coming faster and more robustly than most of us really are ready to believe or accept. Hopefully, some people will change their perspective on that today. So let's do a little time travel. Let's get to 2031. Here's your new reality in 2031. You now have enough computing power, quantum computing power, that if you're willing to part with $1,000, you can carry it around with you in the pocket, okay? That means things that were unsolvable over thousands of years can be solved in seconds or minutes. I'll let that sink in for a minute. okay? AI has now been around for 15 or 20 years, and it's been working 24/7, 365, while we sleep, while we vacation, while we eat, while we work. And it's been connected with other AI computers. And now it's got the power of quantum computing, and it's accelerating, and it's compelling, because we know it on that linear part of the line, but it's headed for the knee of the curve, okay? Right around 2030 or 2031. So it's a dominant conversation point in every regard. Internet of Things becomes, who knows what this is? Any guesses? Internet of Everything. Usually, I bring books to hand out to the people, but if you give me your card, I will send you the book. It's a Peter Diamandis book, and it's really good. It's called The Future is Faster Than You Think, okay? If you're interested, I'm happy to do that for you. Autonomous vehicles plus GPS. What happens when that gets really good? Because let's face it, it's good enough, but is it really, 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 really good? You ever have a GPS send you to the wrong place? That's the story of my life, I think. So what you get is mobility as a service. Driver's licenses start to go away. Car insurance is reinvented. Fleet becomes a thing. Fleet facilities for the real estate brokers. That's a thing, okay? 3D printed everything. I'll cover that in a minute. CRISPR, which is gene editing, very effective, very efficient, very low cost. You take CRISPR and you add it to biotech and nanotech, it's almost unlimited what you could do with the world in that respect. A big thing for me is abundant low-cost solar energy. The Earth is bathed in enough energy from the sun every single day that every person in the Earth combined couldn't consume. We just can't store it right now. I'll cover that in a minute as well, okay? But I think solar dominates the world in 2031. Blockchains. Blockchains are in that linear part of the curve where everybody's going, that's a dumb idea. I don't get it. It's not working. Just do the math and watch the curve, okay? In 10 years, blockchain will dominate everything. Money, contracts, buying pizza, everything. It's a real thing. Most experts will tell you blockchain bigger than the internet itself. Hard to even fathom that, right? Okay, so are there X factors? Of course. I'm not going to cover them all, but we just lived through a force majeure event. Climate change, again, you could ignore the math and pretend it's not happening, but it's real, and it's existential, and it is an X factor. Cybercrime, like we talked about with the Gulf pipeline, right? Infrastructure access. If we lose access to our power grid, if we lose access to the internet, what are we going to do? I don't mean for an hour. I mean for 3 days, or 3 weeks, or 3 months. Are you ready for that? Okay? So there are X factors, of course. Excuse me, I have a call. That's actually my alarm. That's good. Let's get it on with the predictions so we can get on with the show. Everybody ready for some really robust, bold, daring predictions? Number one, the truth economy arrives by 2031. What do I mean by that? Well, in my estimation, when I grew up, there was 3 places to get news: ABC, CBS, and NBC. That was about it. Now, there's newspapers, there was radio, of course, okay? But there was a very finite place to get the truth. Today, we have millions of channels, millions of sources. And if you don't like what you're trying to find, you can start one yourself, can't you? Right? It wouldn't even be that hard. That doesn't include podcasts. It's just a representation to help you understand the truth doesn't exist anymore. And it's painful to me because I was brought up on the truth. It's either yes or no. It's black or white. And what this says is there's only shades. There's only what I say, and there's only what you say. And we both got our facts from credible places and credible sources. That dominates the economy in 2031, okay? So, a little test for you. One of these images is real. Which one is which? 2 are computer generated. Which one is, and one is real. Can you tell which is which? Any guesses? Anybody? Nobody wants a book? 2 you think is which?
I think 3 is real.
You think 3 is real?
It's hard to tell.
Yeah, it is hard to tell. That's the point, right?
I can't
Okay? Check the ears, check the teeth, check the facial hair. Okay? Anybody else? Okay? So I tricked you, I'm sorry. They're all computer generated. Not one of those is real. Is that outrageous or what? And that's today. Now, 10 years from now, what does that look like? Okay? Most experts will tell you that reality and virtual reality in 10 years will be indistinguishable from one another. Not a reality I'm super excited about personally, okay? But if they can do that today, just wait, okay? That goes right back to the truth. How many people have seen this video of Richard Nixon? Take a look at this. This is a fake video, I really want to stress. This is not real, and he did not say or do this.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace.
Okay, that was about the Apollo mission, because when they first went to the moon, just in case it
For
crashed.
every human being who looks up at the moon in the nights to come
Okay.
will know
Thank you. I was never a huge fan. All I'm saying is somebody made that recently. It's what they call deep fake. Okay? But if you find that on the internet and you don't know better, would you swear to yourself that the Apollo mission crashed and they all died on the moon? What's the truth? And that's why we're talking about it. Number two, the money in your pocket and mine is worthless in 10 years. Everything's digital. Everything, okay? Will you pay with a blink of an eye, a ring, a phone? We can debate the methodology. By the way, James Whitaker says the only thing that there will be in 10 years, and remember, this is the guy that invented the browser and then perfected it, is voice command and gesture. Voice and gesture. 10 years, that's all there is. So will you pay like this? Will you say, pay? Charge my card? I don't know, okay? But data is to be collected by everyone. It's already being collected from all of us, but how many of us are actually collecting it ourselves? How many people write into their contracts, my data belongs to me, you can't use it without my permission? How many people have that clause in their contracts? If you take nothing else away from today, I hope you put that into your contracts. It's your data. And it's worth a lot, and you're giving it away for free, and me, okay? Data overload. So your footprint every single day, and mine, and I just did the math, I just did the research rather, is almost 10 gigabytes a day, every single day. And it's growing exponentially. That's how much we put out when we go through a toll with our toll pass, or use our credit card, or our GPS pings a cell tower, okay? Yes, we do social media, we do email, those things count, okay? That's the average of every person on the earth, 9 to 10. So many of us are using a lot more than that, okay? And we're giving that data away for free, and we're getting nothing in return. And yet, in 10 years, instead of paying somebody to store it, you're probably gonna have so much of it, you're gonna pay somebody to delete it. Think about it. The math is there, okay? And by the way, there's a lot of people who will tell you privacy died when the iPhone first arrived. Is that 2004? 2004? First iPhone, I think, right? You haven't had privacy since then. But it's definitely dead by 2031, and I'm sorry about that. It bugs me too. So much so that United Nations has come out with a list of things you can do about it today, okay? You can't talk about big data without talking about things like privacy and ownership, and that's what we just covered. Number three, you will know some Python. Who knows what Python is? Anybody? It's not a snake. It's a code. 100% of AI code is Python. If AI is that dominant, then my logic is you either need to know it or you need to have somebody who does at your beck and call. And you better trust that person with your life, not just a hired vendor. You better trust somebody if you're not willing to learn it yourself, okay? Because AI is that dominant in 10 years. That means all of us are going to go through some amount, a little or a lot, of upskilling is what they call it, relearning, lifelong learning. How many people think the campus experience, my daughter just graduated from college 2 weeks ago, very proud of that. She's awesome, got a job, She's set. It's a dream come true for my wife and I. That campus experience she just had, which was wrecked by COVID, and she still made the best of it. How many people think that campus experience is price unsustainable and due for a major overhaul? Anybody? Yeah, a lot of hands there, okay? That's what we're talking about here. This is the CEO of Alphabet, which is the parent to Google. He's also the CEO of Google, Sundar. And Sundar says, AI is one of the most important things that we're working on. It's more profound than, gee, I don't know, electricity or fire, which I consider to be two of the best inventions of all time, okay? And he's putting AI in the same class. That's what we're really talking about. It also ushers in an era of digital twins. I could make a whole presentation about this, but basically, every person and everything and every city and every car, everything you can think of in 10 years will have a virtual digital twin where you can preemptively detect, but also simulate change before you spend the money or cut into the body to perform surgery. You're going to simulate it to make sure what you do and the medicines you use and the procedures you use will work on that patient. All driven by AI, okay? You didn't think I could go through a whole presentation on technology without a little Elon Musk, did you? Did you see him on Saturday Night Live, by the way? He was kind of funny, I thought. I'm really close to the cutting edge, and it scares the heck out of me. It's more capable than anybody realizes, and it's growing exponentially. There's that exponential thing again. So he gets it. He understands it. He's in favor of banning AI, by the way. So is Bill Gates, for the same reason. Number 4, as I said earlier, blockchain is bigger than the internet itself in 10 years. It drives everything: currency, real estate taxes, land registry, voting. It's a date stamp in time that's unhackable, that can be added on and controlled by the stakeholders without a center of trust, like a bank or a government. The power of the data is in the hands of the owner of the data. That's why it's so important that you own your data. Make no small effort to own your data, okay? Smart contracts, tokenization of real estate. Everybody's going to own a piece of a building the way you own a share of a stock, okay? All through blockchain. If you think I'm wrong, take a look at the ecosystem as of today. On the left is real estate only. On the right is a list of applications that have already established a market foothold around the world. Not necessarily in real estate, just real world use cases. That's today. Now project out 10 years. Okay? By the way, there's a whole country dedicated to blockchain. It's called Liberland. It was a land grab of a small piece of land. That's really it right there in the center, between Croatia and Serbia. You can look it up online. It's a real place. I actually became a citizen of Liberland because, I'm that nerdy blockchain kind of a guy. I had to check it out. I didn't believe it was real, and then I checked it out. So for $100, I was able to get a passport to Liberland. I don't know if I'll ever really go, but they are building a country from the ground up on the backbone of blockchain. And you can participate in that great human experience and experiment if you're so inclined. Okay, number 5, the last mile is solved in 10 years. You'll probably have a robot or a neuro autonomous vehicle delivered to you or a drone before 10 years. But in 10 years, it's mainstream, which means we've now progressed to everything as a service. What do you need? Where do you need it? When do you want it? It's on demand. There is no limit to what I'm talking about. Let me show you this video real quick on 3D printing. This is a building, and that's why it's relevant. So this is the Dubai Ministry of Tourism. Anybody been to Dubai? If you've been to Dubai in the last couple of years, have you seen this? This is about 2,700 square feet, okay? See if you can guess how much it costs after the video. So this is a real building, you really can visit it. Okay, so this is a one-off, not at commercial scale. Anyone want to guess what this cost? 2,700 feet. How much? Good guess. Anybody else? You want a book, don't you? $150, $150,000, $150,000 before commercial scale pricing, right? Is that our future? Don't you think? Yeah, it does. But there's whole communities of 3D printed houses going up all over the world, right? I tried to keep it commercial for this audience, but maybe I should have included some of that. How about 3D printed food? Has anybody tried 3D printed food? Proteins? Anybody? It's a real thing. There's a restaurant where every piece of food, every plate, every table, every chair, everything in the place has been 3D printed, okay? They were just ramping out a global expansion when COVID hit. So it will come back, okay? You can buy, this is a 3D food printer. You can buy for somewhere between $400 and $5,000, depending on the size and the style. You can make your own pasta, your own chocolate. It's pretty amazing, okay? In 2031, my prediction is you will be eating 3D printed food, like it was the only thing you've ever done in your whole life. And I know most people violently object to that statement, and yet I'm pretty sure about it. So come visit me in 10 years or invite me back and we'll see. Number 7, mobility in every respect has been reinvented. Electric, autonomous. It's no longer one person, one car. That dynamic is dead, okay? Take a look on the right when you take the one person, one car dynamic and turn it on its head. That's 2nd Street, 2nd Avenue in Seattle, right? Put them on buses, put them on a light train, light rail car. Oh, so could we reclaim some of our city centers and the parking spaces and repurpose that to something more special, parks or learning centers or restaurants or outdoor festivals, or I could think of a long, long list, can't you? Right? That's just the start. Trucking, autonomous, way too economic. Well, we'll see what Dave thinks, but I think way too economical with way too many lives saved, way fewer accidents, for this not to be ushered in ahead of cars, okay? I think this comes before cars. We'll see. Okay, not just trucks, pretty much every vehicle you can think of, okay? Could you imagine a truck working the construction site, Jonathan, 24/7 while we sleep? Well, it's electric. It's going to cost you almost nothing. It's autonomous. You don't even need to pay a worker. What does that do to your construction timeline? Okay? Police, riot control, buses, container ships, airplanes, air taxis. 10 years, this is what we're talking about, okay? I'm going to skip over this because it's a little bit longer of a video and I want to compress our time, but I'm happy to make this available to somebody if you want to see it. This is a video that explains Hyperloop, which is underway now, connecting different places at high speed, either under the ground or over the ground. And earlier, I don't know if I can go back, but I said mobility in 3D. And what I meant was 3 dimensions: air, ground, subterranean. That's the mobility we will be living in 10 years. And Hyperloop, probably not ready yet in 10 years, but you're probably going to have the opportunity to go between Los Angeles and San Francisco, or Boston and Washington, D.C., Dubai and Abu Dhabi. There will be places where you can do it. It just won't be everywhere yet. So I'm going to skip that. This is the concept map, though, of how they're going to connect major city centers around the world via Hyperloop that completely untethers us and changes where we go and why we go there and how we go there. So much so, oh, okay, we're going to go to VTOL. So how many people know what VTOL is? Vertical take, you cheated. You saw the presentation ahead of time, didn't you? No, I'm teasing with you. So vertical takeoff and landing, right? Do you know your air rights? Can you monetize your air rights? Is that a source of revenue you've overlooked? Do you even know your air rights? Go find out. Take a look. How many people are willing to get into an air taxi in the next 10 years? A driver in this air taxi. Not as many hands. I'm willing. I'm okay with it. buildings do you know that are being constructed with that VTOL pad on the top? 'Cause I'm not sure where else you're supposed to put it, by the way. How many people want to live in close proximity to one now? Just in case it's a real thing. Doesn't have to be every building, right? It's cool. Home for dinner, not a problem. I think you get the gist. I'm going to skip ahead for time, but I think you get the idea. This is your choice between Caltran and a regular Uber and an Uber Elevate air taxi to get from San Jose to San Francisco or San Francisco to San Jose. Think of the cost and time savings when this hits commercial scale. And that's why this is going to happen. In fact, I know for a fact there are a number of companies negotiating license rights, air rights, takeoff and landing rights with huge portfolio property owners so that they can hop, skip, and jump around without having to do it with a bunch of one-off owners. And those negotiations are underway right now. Okay? What you end up with is super regional clusters where the Midwest is now competing with the Southeast and the Pacific Northwest because we're all in it together. And if it's good for Milwaukee, it's good for Chicago. And if it's good for Chicago, it's probably good for Des Moines. If it's good for Des Moines, it's probably good for Indianapolis. Okay? Because we can go to any of those places in a blink of an eye for way less money than you ever thought possible. You could go to Des Moines and back in the same day in a Hyperloop and be effective. You could go there for lunch and come back by 2 o'clock. Okay? By the way, this is really important. So you've heard a lot about 5G, right? 5G doesn't work quite yet, even though our phones and our phone carriers would have us try to believe otherwise, but it will. And the reason is that the Earth is about to be blanketed in all these mini satellites. And instead of GPS triangulation, which means you ping 3 different satellites and that's how they know where you are or what your GPS coordinates are, it will be a minimum of 16. Okay? And when that happens, the precision goes up what? Exponentially. That's what we call it, right? When that happens, it ushers in a whole new era of autonomy and mobility. And this is happening right now. Those satellites are being launched right now. Okay? Number 8, the solar era is officially upon us. The days of petroleum exports dominating a government's budget and therefore all of its social services for its citizens are effectively over in the next 10 years. Okay? There's enough solar energy hitting the Earth in an hour to satisfy every person for a year. That's in an hour. If I can just solve the battery storage issue, and there's about $500 billion of VC money trying to solve that problem right now. I promise you it will be solved in 10 years. Okay? If you look at the chart, you can see what happens around 2030, where the yellow bars become the dominant form of energy consumption in the world. Okay? And that from that point forward, it's solar. Every major country has banned engines, okay? Combustion engine vehicles by 2030, 2035. What do you think the price of oil is in 2030 or 2035? Demand's down. It's not zero, but it's down. $20 a barrel, $25 a barrel, probably settles in somewhere around there. Okay? There's your battery storage issue. Number 9, almost done. My definition of the digital divide is different than most people's, is that most of the decision makers, and this is with full respect to every person in the room, no matter what your age or position is in the world, most of the decision makers today at big companies that make policy for everybody else or control capital spend for everybody else grew up in an era that we call analog, without all these digital tools. Okay? They appreciate them, they use them. It's not that they're neophytes with it, but their value system is different than a future generation, a millennial or a Gen Z who grew up with nothing else but, whose digital alignment and entitlement is complete from beginning to end. And when they rotate, hey Jeff, when did you sneak in here? Nice to see you. It's good. Did you teleport in? That's awesome. Anyways, when that generation becomes our decision makers, that digital divide compresses. And in about 10 years, in about a generation, that becomes a reality. They also control all the consumer spending, which controls about 75% of our GDP. Okay? So it's really important. I was talking earlier about customer lifetime value. This is something you should Google when you have more time. Every company tracks you, whether you realize it or not. What you spend, how often you spend it, how much profit you contribute, who you hang out with, how big your family is, how often you buy it, where else you spend your money, and they put an algorithm to it, and they know immediately what your score is. And this determines whether you wait for 45 minutes on hold for customer service or 5 minutes. It makes a difference between whether you get a person or an automatic machine, okay? Check this out when you get a chance. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I can I go back? Is that back? So how many people have ever seen Black Mirror? That's your homework. Binge watch Black Mirror. Check out the episode called Nosedive, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, okay? The episodes are not connected to each other. So even though it's a series, if you watch one, you don't have to be caught up to the next one. Binge watch Black Mirror. It's awesome. Okay, everyone alive today is being scored. I think you get the point. Number 10, and then we'll close it down. Climate change is existential. If we don't solve for that, none of this other stuff even matters, not even AI, except in the application of AI to solve climate change. And in 10 years, if the Earth's average temperature goes up 1 to 1.5 degrees, our plants die, our livestock dies, and it becomes truly existential. And the reason I'm talking about it with all of you is that the commercial real estate industry puts out 40% of all the total carbon in the world, which means, in my opinion, it's our responsibility as an industry to start addressing it in a leadership position. We're talking about buildings going from a net consumer of energy to a net zero, and not stopping there, but being net positive, actually generating more energy than they can consume and then selling it back to the grid, okay? That's where we're really headed. Carbon emissions is a huge part of that. Sea rise. So I have a colleague who's giving a speech in Miami. Guess what the Miami commercial realtors want to talk about? They want to talk about flood insurance, right? And property values. And what happens with climate change. That's all they want to talk about, and rightfully so, because they're in deep doo-doo. And not just in Miami. So global warming, I think you get the idea. I didn't have a place to put this in here, but it's super important. I really want to stress cybersecurity in light of what's happened with this pipeline. It's got me a little bit freaked out. The enemy knows the system. They got it, okay? And this quote just came yesterday or the day before. Cybersecurity will be the issue of the decade in terms of how much worse this is going to get, okay? And that's why I had to squeeze it in here somewhere. Enough time travel. Welcome back. I'm sorry I've overstayed my welcome. I hope you enjoyed it. Charles Darwin, turns out, sort of like Moore's Law, he had it right. It's not the smartest, it's not the strongest, it's the ones who adapt to change, and this really, at the end of the day, is about change management, right? Final word, in a business context, you have to get to the future ahead of your customers and be ready to greet them when they arrive. I could not agree more with Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce. One final prediction for you. For most of us anyways, your 2021 will be better than your 2020. You can take it to the bank. All right, let's go to work. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to talk to you about it today. I know we're a little bit behind on time. Do you want to go right to the panel, or do you want me to take yes, no questions? Okay, you can ask the questions on the panel, or I will be around at the networking if you want to talk one-on-one or ask some questions. I'm sorry we didn't have time for that. But let's just go right to the panel. Panelists, I know a few are here, but I don't know where everybody is. Please come up, and let's have a conversation about what you just saw.